There are decisive moments in human existence when our consciousness awakens to an uncomfortable reality. We realize we carry weights that don't belong to us, that we live imprisoned by others' expectations, that our vital energy is being constantly drained by bonds that diminish us instead of strengthening us. Arthur Schopenhauer said that life oscillates between necessity and boredom, but Friedrich Nietzsche went further. He showed us that the true tragedy is not what life imposes on us, but what we choose to accept as inevitable. Today, dear listener, we will dive together into one of the most revolutionary discoveries that philosophy can provide us: the transformation of the soul through liberation from destructive energetic bonds. If these words have already awakened something in your inner being, if you feel they've reached you at the precise moment, leave your like now, for this message could be the catalyst for the change your soul has been seeking. Visualize your essence as a sacred flame. This flame was born bright, intense, with a unique and irreplaceable purpose. But over the years, people, circumstances, emotional obligations began to approach this flame like energetic vampires. Some come to light their own torches from your light, creating more brightness in the world. Others, however, appear as cold winds trying to extinguish your flame, or as shadows that block your luminosity. Gradually, the flame that was radiant becomes weak, flickering, almost imperceptible. Nietzsche warned us about this phenomenon when he explored the concept of herd morality, the tendency to live not from our own inner strength, but in constant submission to the demands and manipulations of the collective. Psychological submission, in Nietzsche's words, represents one of the most subtle and devastating forms of self-destruction. It's not just about isolated moments of yielding or compromise. It's something much deeper and more corrosive. It's when we allow other people's neuroses, their insecurities, their unresolved traumas, to become a permanent part of our emotional reality. It's when we absorb the criticisms of those who want us small and transform these criticisms into our own self-criticism. It's when we become emotional hostages to individuals who may not even be physically present, but whose opinions, fears, and limitations continue controlling our decisions like invisible ghosts. How many opportunities have you already lost because you anticipated someone specific's disapproval? How many times have you sabotaged your own success because you knew it would awaken envy or resentment in people close to you? How many times have you felt obligated to diminish yourself, to hide your achievements, to apologize for your happiness, because it would disturb those who prefer you failed, dependent, always available for their emotional demands? This is what Nietzsche identified as inversion of values, when we begin living our lives not toward our personal excellence, but in constant adaptation to others' insecurities and limitations. There's a fundamental difference between authentic connection and disguised emotional dependence. Genuine connection inspires, strengthens, celebrates each person's individuality. Toxic dependence, on the contrary, feeds on insecurity, emotional blackmail, psychological control. It manifests through phrases like, "You can't abandon me like this," "I'm your family, you owe me loyalty," "Without you I can't live," "You're being very selfish." These are not expressions of genuine love. They are tools of energetic manipulation. They are strategies to keep people imprisoned in dynamics that consume their vitality. Nietzsche perceived that most human beings develop what he called parasitic existence, a life where we are constantly molded by others' needs, traumas, and expectations, instead of building our reality from our own vision and creative force. He challenged us to transform ourselves into what he called sovereign individuals, people who possess the courage to create their own principles, to follow their own intuitions, to break the chains that bind them to patterns that no longer serve their development. But here we arrive at the most challenging aspect of this emancipation journey, the terror of rejection. We've been programmed since childhood to believe that prioritizing our mental and emotional health is narcissism, that creating healthy boundaries is insensitivity, that refusing requests that exhaust us is lack of compassion. This is one of the greatest lies we've internalized. Nietzsche revealed to us that true generosity is not infinitely annulling ourselves in favor of others, but rather preserving our own energetic integrity so we can contribute to the world from our full strength. If you're identifying these patterns in your own experience while absorbing these words, know that you're not walking alone in this transformation. Subscribe to the channel now to continue accessing content that will support you in this profound inner revolution. When you find yourself permanently exhausted, drained, tormented because of certain relationships, you're not being beneficial to anyone. You transform into an empty reservoir, trying to nourish others with water you don't possess. You become a burned-out lamp, trying to illuminate others' paths, while you yourself stumble in darkness. This doesn't represent love. This is self-sabotage, masqueraded as virtue. The process of cutting destructive bonds is not a gesture of hostility or insensitivity. It's a sacred act of energetic preservation. It's a profound recognition that your vital force is precious, finite, and that you possess the right and obligation to channel it toward relationships, projects, and experiences that feed your essence, not consume it. Nietzsche explored the concept of amor fati, not just accepting your destiny, but having the power to consciously choose where to invest your attention and energy. Reflect on the people in your life who, when you're in their presence, make you feel diminished, more tense, more insecure. Think about interactions that seem to vampirize your energy, leaving you exhausted and disoriented. Think about dynamics where you constantly feel pressured to give more than you receive, where your emotions are systematically devalued, where your victories are minimized or converted into sources of guilt. These are the destructive connections that Nietzsche would encourage us to analyze with relentless courage. There is a specific vibration that emanates from people who don't desire your genuine growth. They may even proclaim they love you, but this love is conditional. It exists only while you remain fragile, insecure, available for their needs. The instant you begin to flourish, to prosper, to develop confidence and autonomy, this love metamorphoses into destructive criticism, disguised sabotage, attempts to make you feel guilty for your own transformation. Nietzsche identified that many people maintain an unconscious investment in others' fragility, not out of deliberate cruelty, but because their own identity is based on being indispensable, on being the savior, on being the one who rescues the needy. When you begin to free yourself from the position of victim or dependent, these people lose their purpose and subconsciously begin to sabotage you, so you return to the place where they feel important and influential. The process of recognizing these dynamics can be emotionally devastating. It means admitting that people we claim to love, people for whom we made monumental sacrifices, may not have our genuine growth as a priority. It means recognizing that certain loyalties we considered unquestionable are, in reality, emotional shackles. It means accepting that some of our oldest and most familiar connections may be precisely those that most prevent us from becoming our most authentic version. Nietzsche taught us that genuine spiritual evolution means being prepared to question absolutely everything, including our most deeply rooted loyalties. It means having the courage to inquire, does this relationship empower me or limit me? Does this person celebrate my development or subtly undermine it? Does this dynamic bring me closer to my truth or distance me from it? And when the answers are painful, having the bravery to act in harmony with this revelation. There is a specific stage in this awakening process that is especially challenging, when you begin to clearly perceive toxic patterns, but haven't yet cultivated the emotional strength necessary to transform this perception into action. It's like awakening in a prison and clearly seeing the locks, but not yet having discovered how to break them. This intermediate period can be anguishing because you can no longer delude yourself about the nature of these relationships, but you also don't yet feel empowered to modify them. Nietzsche would call this a period of fertile suffering, not the unconscious pain of those who live in self-destructive patterns without realizing it, but the conscious pain of those who see reality and know they need to act on this vision. It's a necessary, transformative pain that precedes all authentic liberation. It's the discomfort that precedes rebirth. During this period, it's common for people around you to perceive your vibrational change even before you take any concrete measures. They intuit that you're emotionally disconnecting, that you're no longer as accessible for manipulation, that something fundamental has transformed in your energy. And frequently, this provokes an escalation of controlling behaviors. It's as if they instinctively sense they're losing influence over you and intensify the pressure to force you back to the previous pattern. If you're experiencing this now, if you notice that people around you are amplifying drama precisely when you're trying to emancipate yourself, leave a comment sharing your experience. Sometimes, knowing we're not isolated in this journey makes all the difference. The silence that emerges after breaking a toxic bond is initially disturbing. We're so accustomed to chaos, to perpetual tension, to constant emotional demands, that when this turbulent energy withdraws from our life, we experience a disconcerting emptiness. But this emptiness is sacred. It's the space that's created so our true essence can finally breathe, expand, manifest without external interference. Nietzsche explored the concept of eternal return, the idea that we should live as if each moment would repeat infinitely. This forces us to ask, if I had to relive this same dynamic, with this same person, having these same draining conversations, feeling this same anguish, eternally, would I accept this? If the answer is negative, then you have your guidance about what needs to be transformed in your reality. When we begin to energetically free ourselves from destructive connections, something extraordinary happens. Our vibrational frequency elevates. We begin to magnetize people, opportunities, and experiences that are aligned with our true nature, not with our diminished version that adapted to others' emotional needs. We begin to discover who we really are when we're not constantly reacting, defending ourselves, or trying to validate our worth. But this emancipation process requires a quality that Nietzsche considered essential: courage. Courage to frustrate people who are accustomed to exploiting us emotionally. Courage to endure the guilt they'll try to impose when they realize they can no longer control us. Courage to remain firm in our boundaries even when we're labeled as insensitive, cold, or ungrateful. The reality is that people who benefit from our energy in a vampiric way will always react negatively when we begin establishing healthy boundaries. They'll intensify manipulation, increase attempts to guilt us, may even fabricate dramatic crises to force us to resume the role of savior or caretaker. This isn't an expression of love. This is desperation from someone who's losing a source of free energy. Nietzsche taught us that true strength isn't in tolerating everything, in being infinitely permissive, in always forgiving and forgetting. True strength lies in knowing when to say enough, when to walk away, when to choose your own mental and emotional sanity above others' toxic demands. It lies in recognizing that you're not responsible for other adults' emotional stability, especially when this responsibility compromises your own inner peace. There is a fundamental difference between temporarily supporting someone in a legitimate difficulty and becoming a permanent energy source for someone who refuses to evolve, to transform, to assume responsibility for their own existence. The first is genuine compassion. The second is codependency disguised as kindness. One of the most liberating revelations of this process is realizing how many of the emotional crises for which we're constantly summoned to intervene are not real emergencies, but repetitive patterns of people who learn to use drama and chaos as a way to monopolize others' attention and energy. Nietzsche observed that many people become dependent on their own crises because it provides them with a sense of relevance and guarantees that others will always be available to rescue them. When you finally break a toxic bond, when you finally free yourself from a dynamic that was draining your life force, you discover something extraordinary. You possessed much more energy, creativity, joy, and love to offer the world than you ever imagined. This energy was being constantly drained, dissipated, wasted in dynamics that led nowhere constructive. Nietzsche emphasized the importance of becoming creators of meaning, people who don't simply accept the moral and emotional patterns imposed on them, but who consciously choose what kind of life they want to build, what kind of relationships they want to cultivate, what kind of energy they want to radiate. This demands an internal revolution, a willingness to question everything we considered unquestionable. The healing process that emerges after cutting toxic bonds is gradual but transformative. First, there's relief, the sensation that an immense burden has been removed from your shoulders. Then, loneliness may arise, the recognition that you may have fewer people around you, but those who remained are genuinely loving and nurturing. Then comes rediscovery. You begin to remember who you were before molding yourself to others' destructive emotional needs. Finally, renewal emerges. You begin attracting relationships based on mutual respect, shared growth, authentic celebration of each other's successes. You discover it's possible to have deep connections without perpetual drama, love without manipulation, intimacy without loss of individuality. During this renewal phase, something fascinating happens with your intuitive perception. It becomes sharper, more reliable. When you're no longer constantly bombarded by the chaotic energy of destructive relationships, you develop a much more refined capacity to identify people's true intentions, to recognize warning signs from the beginning, to trust your instincts about who deserves access to your intimate energy. Nietzsche taught us that each of us possesses a unique mission in this existence, something only we can contribute to the world. But this contribution can only emerge when we're free from the emotional chains that keep us imprisoned to limited versions of ourselves. When we cut the wires that connect us to destructive energies, we create space for our true essence to manifest. The guilt we experience when considering breaking toxic bonds is frequently the result of deep conditioning that taught us our function in life is to be useful to others, even at the cost of our own vitality. But Nietzsche reminds us that our first responsibility is to ourselves, not out of narcissism, but because we can only offer the world what we possess internally. When you're constantly exhausted by toxic dynamics, when your energy is always being directed to resolve others' emotional crises, when you live in perpetual state of tension and vigilance, you have nothing authentic to offer. You become an empty source trying to nourish others. This doesn't benefit anyone genuinely. The act of energetically freeing yourself is not abandonment, it's spiritual responsibility. It's recognizing that your vital energy is sacred and that you possess the obligation to consciously direct it toward manifestations that elevate not only you, but the entire network of people who are genuinely touched by your presence. Nietzsche observed that many people confuse emotional turbulence with spiritual depth. They believe relationships filled with drama, perpetual conflict, extreme emotional neediness are more authentic or meaningful than connections based on harmony, respect, and mutual growth. But this is a dangerous illusion. Turbulence is not depth. Frequently, it's chaos disguised as intensity. The deepest and most transformative relationships are those where both people feel free to grow, explore, question, evolve without fear of judgment or rejection. They are connections where the other's presence amplifies your own light instead of obscuring it. They are dynamics where you feel more yourself, not less. There's an interesting phenomenon that happens when you finally free yourself from destructive relational patterns. You begin attracting people who have also gone through similar processes of awakening and emancipation. It's as if there's a specific frequency that emotionally healthy people recognize in each other. And to be part of an invisible community of beings who chose authenticity above convenience, growth above comfort, truth above toxic familiarity. When you finally find the courage to cut bonds that were limiting you, you're not just freeing yourself, you're liberating the other person too. You're forcing them to find other energy sources, to develop other coping strategies, to grow in ways they might never have been obligated to grow while they had you as a perpetual source of emotional support. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give someone is to stop being what they think they need from us. It's forcing them to discover their own strength, their own capacity to deal with life without using us as emotional support. This can be painful in the short term, but it's liberating for both in the long term. Nietzsche taught us that authentic growth always requires some level of destruction of illusions, of obsolete patterns, of identities that no longer serve. Cutting toxic bonds is an act of creative destruction. You're destroying dynamics that limited you to create space for connections that empower you. One of the deepest perceptions that emerges in this process is understanding that many of the people who claim to love us actually only loved the version of us that met their needs. They loved our emotional availability, our willingness to resolve their conflicts, our function as a source of validation or support. But when we begin establishing limits, prioritizing our own well-being, developing our individuality, this love quickly transforms into criticism, manipulation, or abandonment. This can be devastating to realize, but it's also profoundly liberating. It means you no longer need to distort your essence to maintain these connections. It means you can finally stop trying to be who you're not, to guarantee love from people who, in reality, never loved you for who you really are. And now, dear listener, I want you to pause and reflect deeply on your own existence. What are the connections that drain your energy instead of nourishing it? What are the voices in your mind that aren't yours, but echoes of people who prefer you small and dependent? What are the energetic wires you need to cut so your true essence can finally flourish? If you feel you need courage to take this step, that you need strength to make this transformation, click the thanks button now. Your energy will help this content reach more people who also need to hear this message of liberation. The journey of energetic liberation isn't simple, but it's essential. It's the path back home, to your own soul, your own truth, your own vital force, untouched by others' projections and manipulations. It's the beginning of a life where you no longer live in constant reaction, but in conscious creation. Nietzsche left us a transformative truth. Become who you are. But to become who we really are, we first need to stop being who others need us to be. We need to cut the wires that keep us tied to versions of ourselves that exist only to serve others' emotional needs. Your energy is sacred. Your inner peace is precious. Your joy is your divine right. And any person or situation that consistently threatens these blessings doesn't deserve access to your vital force. This isn't selfishness. This is profound spiritual wisdom. The silence that emerges after liberation from toxic bonds is the sound of your soul finally being able to breathe. It's the sacred space where your true voice can emerge, where your genuine dreams can take shape, where your unique contribution to the world can finally manifest. Today, you have the opportunity to make a choice that can completely transform your life's trajectory. You can choose courage instead of the familiar comfort of dysfunction. You can choose your own evolution instead of the stagnation that comes from keeping everyone happy at your expense. You can choose to become who you really are instead of remaining who others need you to be. Energetic freedom is within reach of your hands. The healing of your soul is waiting for a single, courageous decision. Nietzsche invites you, through the centuries, to have the courage to cut the wires that bind you to unnecessary suffering and to embrace the magnificence of who you really are. If this video touched something deep in your soul, if you recognized patterns in your life that need to be transformed, leave a comment sharing what connection you feel you need to break to reclaim your vital energy. Your courage can inspire others to take the same liberating step. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving content that awakens your consciousness and elevates your vibration. And if this message really impacted your life in some significant way, consider clicking the thanks button as a way to energize this work and allow it to reach even more souls who need to hear this liberating truth. Remember, your energy is sacred, and you have the divine right to consciously direct it toward what truly nourishes your soul.